The information provided on this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not intended as medical or professional advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional before starting any new exercise or nutrition program. The opinions expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the podcast or its sponsors.
Welcome back, everyone, to Talk Your Abs Off. I am Abby Clapper, and today I'm joined by Krysti Jonas. Krysti, how are you today?
I'm wonderful. Wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I'm so happy to be talking to you today, Krysti. Would you mind just sharing a little bit about you, what you went to school for, and what you do now for your career?
Yeah. So the basis of me, I'm from a small town in Indiana. Grew up playing sports there, raised on corn, eating corn, around fields, all that kind of fun stuff. Went to school at the University of North Carolina, where I played college volleyball for 4 years. I received a bachelor's of science and business administration there. But after working in the field of finance for a couple years, I just felt like I needed to help people in a different way. So I was like, let's go do nursing. So received another bachelor's in nursing, and then did that for about 14 years. I've been a nurse, almost 15. And about 3 years ago, I really noticed a shift in, like everyone in the healthcare industry. But I became a patient of my own. Like I had my own gut issues, and that set me down a rabbit hole to this new concept for me of functional medicine, of uncovering the root cause. And that led me to obtaining more education and became board certified in functional medicine as a nurse specialist. So that's what I'm doing now, is uncovering root causes for people, specifically women, to empower them through education so that they can evolve and thrive in this life that they want to live.
That is so cool and so impressive. I think that it's such an important thing now. I feel like a lot more people are taking control of their health, or they at least want to know more and be educated and kind of know what's going on. So as like functional medicine, I think really has a place now and can be super helpful. Can you explain a little bit more as to what a functional health nurse is?
Yeah, so a functional health nurse is someone who's going to not just look at labs or your symptoms as those, like at the very surface level. We're going to take a step back and want to uncover what's truly going on. And it's not a me telling you type of thing. It's a collaboration between the two of us. So with functional nurses, we really take time and talk to you for a very long time. Like our first intake is usually 60 to 90 minutes at least, because we're uncovering everything about your lifestyle. Where you grew up, what you grew up around, your parents, where your grandparents grew up, because things pass down from generation to generation. We're really looking at the 8 foundations of wellness, sleep, stress, nutrition, and then within that, digestion, how you detoxify, your movement, your spirituality, and do you have a supportive environment and community? Because without those things, there is no true health or wealth in our life. So that's the basis of what a functional health nurse is. But then we also have the ability to look at tests in a different manner. So when we look at labs, we have a shorter range that we like to evaluate rather than the standard range you see on the labs you get every day. And then we look at it through a different lens. We can see if you have nutrient deficiencies. We can see if you might have heavy metal toxicity just by looking at certain labs that we can order. And we can even dive deeper. We can look at your poop. It's a really very informational thing. Gross, yes, but it is the window to your health. We can see if you have good bacteria overgrowth or undergrowth, bad bacteria overgrowth. We can look at your immune system, all sorts of things to see how that gut is functioning. And we also have the ability to look at your hormones through a Dutch urine test. That's an option. Testing for specifically in your small intestine, because there's different parasites and bacteria in there that may not show up on a different stool test. And basically taking all of these, the labs, the functional tests, your symptoms, your history, and creating like a little pin board and connecting all the dots to figure out what is actually the start of everything. And so that's kind of where it goes to. And then we work together to create a wellness plan involving those 8 foundations of wellness, because we can't leave one out, because they're all going to be connected in achieving the goals that you want for your wellness.
Right. That is so incredibly fascinating and very much all encompassing, which I think a lot of people would love. Like, I just went to the doctor the other day. I went to an urgent care for something, and it was very much like, oh, okay, it's this. And for example, it was like prescribed an antibiotic that I found out that I didn't even need to take. That was just the answer. And thankfully I didn't take it. But like, I think what you're doing is what people want. Like, I think so many of us are sick of going to the doctor and like having these like band-aids put on like a smaller problem when there's like a much bigger problem that we can kind of work on. And I know that you mentioned gut health, and so I want to dive a little bit more into that because gut health seems to be trending right now, which is great. Like, there's so much in the gut that we just don't understand. So can you talk a little bit about what is gut health and why is it so important?
Gut health is something that should have been trending for years. But it is important because it's literally the center of everything. It starts at your mouth, which is in the middle of your face, and goes all the way through to exit out waste. And it's important because, like I said, it's the middle of everything, but what we put in there, we absorb, we process, we break down. And if there's a break in that chain, you're not going to feel well. Our gut, we have a lining, and that lining can become weak is what we call it. And there's little junctions that can open up. And if those open up from, processed foods that have lots of herbicides, glyphosate, things like that, low fiber, stress, medications can all contribute to weakening our lining. So if those junctions open and we're still eating those processed foods, those toxins leach out into our system. And that's when we start to feel weighed down or even fatigued right after we eat, have the brain fog, trouble losing weight, not being able to have a stool. All of these things are connected to each other. And so that's really like, it's just literally the center of everything. It affects all of your organs. If you don't break down nutrients properly, your brain won't function. Sometimes there's certain things in the heart that you need to process through your gut. It's not going to function right. Even certain diseases or conditions like if you feel a little more anxious, sometimes there's an imbalance in the gut bacteria. And there's a gut microbiome project that they're doing, and it's connecting certain bacteria to anxiety, to certain cancers, to this before it may be even happening. So now this is all very new, but very interesting to say nonetheless.
Yeah. So it sounds like everyone's gut microbiome, it's going to vary from person to person. Is that right?
Absolutely right. We have our own ecosystem, but interestingly enough, our moms pass down their microbiome to us,
Really?
and their moms pass it to them. So it can be a generational thing. So, if you look back to, I don't know, if there's a famine or something in your line of ethnicity, it may have creeped down to you, and why certain things happen in your gut or in how you live is just passed down through that as well.
Oh my.
So it's so interesting. I know when I found that out, my mind was blown. I was like, oh, that's what I did to my kids.
It's like a whole new definition for generational trauma.
Yes, it is, because it's a physical thing that literally is passed down.
Wow.
Yes.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
So I know you mentioned that it can affect like anxiety, things like that. So can gut health impact someone's mental health?
Absolutely. Because not only, so the bacteria in there can actually be correlated with different diseases, like I said. And it affects our hormone levels too. So if we are also holding in the stool too long, we have toxins in there, that's going to affect how we function. And if we have too many toxins within our system, it's going to weigh us down, make our brain not work properly, think thoughts that aren't necessarily true. Me personally, I've experienced this, and by reconnecting to my body, I've been like, oh, that food will trigger this emotion.
Wow.
So in the past, there may have been a connection between that. And so now I realize that it's there. And so I try to avoid that food, obviously, because it's affecting me negatively. But even if I do eat it, I recognize, oh, it's not actually me. It's something imbalanced in my gut.
That is so interesting. I never really thought about it that way. But I guess if you think of it like, let's say we eat like some processed foods, like I know I will feel like absolute poop, like no pun intended. Like for like at least 24 hours, my body just feels like sluggish, and it's almost like you turn into like you are what you eat. Like if you eat like bad food, like you're gonna feel bad. Like, is that kind of the correlation?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And with that, like the foods that are brought to us that are processed are highly processed. And the way the extra ingredients is more important than sometimes the nutrition label, because those are created in a lab. And that is what's going to change your microbiome in your gut. Can also even change your cells. So it's very interesting that it's acceptable at a certain level to be consuming these things, when actually overall it's going to create that inflammation, which then creates the disease in your body.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is absolutely wild. So, okay, let's take a step back from that. We can kind of breathe after all of the gloom and doom from that. And let's take a second and talk about prebiotics and probiotics. So, I'm on Instagram. Everybody's on Instagram or on TikTok, and I'm sure everyone sees, different like prebiotics, probiotics. Do you need it? Do you not? So, I want to know, is it necessary or is it a fad?
Another thing that's definitely not a fad. Every individual has their own ecosystem of microbiome, right? But in order to create that microbiome to be more beneficial, you need these prebiotics to feed them. So prebiotics feed the good bacteria.
Okay.
And then probiotics are the actual bacteria that you need in order to have a stronger gut lining. So probiotics can help create the mucosal lining of the gut, and that is what can close those junctions if they're open. It can strengthen the gut lining and also help move food through and waste out of the body. So yes, they are important. And don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom. There are ways to get it in just by eating foods that we all, for the most part, enjoy. Apples have prebiotics, sauerkraut, almond flour, almonds, leafy greens, all sorts of things. Peas, onions, garlic, all of that can have prebiotics in it. I even sometimes will take sauerkraut, just like a spoonful before I eat, just to kind of prime the pipes, if you will, get those bacteria active, and then I eat, just to help with the digestion and the breakdown of everything. So they're definitely key. And then in regards to probiotics, there's actually even a difference in probiotics. There are spore-forming probiotics and non-spore forming probiotics. Non-spore forming is what you're going to find over the counter a lot of times. It'll say like 5 billion, 10 billion, 10 trillion, whatever. The difference between that and a spore forming is that when that hits the acidic stomach, it's going to kill half of what you put in.
Oh gosh.
Because it's not alive. It can't withstand that acidity. A spore forming bypasses, is able to stay alive through the acidity, and actually activates to feed more good bacteria once it hits the small intestines.
Okay.
So that's kind of something interesting to look at too, is because a lot of people will say, I take a probiotic, but I don't notice anything. You may not notice anything with either of them, but you're going to notice way less with a non-spore forming, because you're getting half of what you're paying for, essentially.
Which is probably what most people are getting, because they're getting it over the counter. I know, like, I'll buy yogurt and it'll say, like, it has probiotics in it, and I don't feel any different. So that's probably something similar, right? Because if it's in a yogurt or something like that.
And yogurt is definitely beneficial, for sure. I mean, obviously watch for processed sugars and additives and things like that, but the probiotics in yogurts are good. A lot of that can help strengthen the gut lining. It can help with skin specifically. There's so many different bacteria that I'm still learning all of them, but there's certain ones that will, if you're really having trouble with your skin, they say to focus on those, building those up. And some of those are in the yogurts.
Okay. And is that a prebiotic or a probiotic?
That would be considered a probiotic.
Probiotic. Okay. So,
in the yogurt.
And it sounds like when you're mentioning the prebiotics, it sounds like there's a lot of foods that we should be eating that already house a lot of those prebiotics. So as long as we're eating a relatively healthy diet, we're getting a lot of those and we don't even realize it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, really, so as a functional medicine nurse, I do recommend supplements, but I try to keep it at a very minimum. So the only people I would really recommend like a prebiotic, like powder or capsule, would be someone who has like a lot going on in their gut, lots of issues, leaky gut, stools all over the place, that kind of thing. Because sometimes these prebiotic and probiotic foods actually can be upsetting to the gut when you're so out of balance. So it's one of those things where you need someone maybe to help guide you, just to help understand what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So then when it comes to like the probiotics, I think you mentioned like sauerkraut. I think that includes maybe like kimchi. Is kombucha a part of that as well?
Kombucha is definitely a good probiotic. Be careful of the sugars, obviously, because sugar can feed the harmful bacteria. So if you have a kombucha that's too high in sugar, you may actually be doing more detriment than good,
Oh, that's
or just canceling it out. I
yeah,
mean,
that's a good
so
one.
just watch the sugar, the added sugars, or even just any sugar in those. But if it says like Whole30, usually you're good on that.
Okay.
But those are definitely beneficial. Pickles, apple cider vinegar, those are all good. And one tip for apple cider vinegar, if you do take that, definitely dilute it a little bit, because you don't want any harmful or issues with your teeth or anything like that,
Okay.
because it can break that down.
Good tip. I always I still have not tried the apple cider vinegar because I'm afraid that I'm just gonna like that it's just not gonna go down well. So it's good tip to dilute it. Can you add it into other drinks? Is that a good thing to do too?
You can if you want, but just dilute it with a little bit of water or something, and you'll just take it down like a champ.
Take it. I love that. That's amazing. Okay, so what are some of the effects of like a high fat, high sugar, or low fiber diets on gut bacteria?
Yeah, so like I kind of mentioned before, high sugar will feed bad bacteria, actually. And that is one of those that would be an indicator if you have a very high craving for sugar after you've eaten a meal. Sometimes that can be an indicator that you have small intestinal bowel overgrowth. SIBO is the short for that. And that can also be an indicator for parasites too. So a couple different things going on up in that upper GI area. So sugar can definitely affect the gut microbiome. It can disrupt it very badly. Low fiber can definitely slow things down, obviously, in your gut. And like I kind of mentioned before, if we hold things in our gut, it's going to create the symptoms that we don't want. So low fiber slows the digestion, can then also, if you're holding stool, weaken the gut lining, and that can lead to issues and infections too. So the low fiber, you got to eat vegetables. I'm sorry, guys, but you got to eat them. You can hide them and stuff. You can like blend them up, and like there's people out there making all these crazy recipes where you've got like 4 servings in one meatball or something nuts. But there's ways to hide it and make it taste good. Trust me, because I've tried some of them. And too high of fat, especially the wrong types of fats, can also reduce the gut lining barrier. Because the way they're processed, some of these fats, they're creating a different chemical reaction essentially. So it's going to go in there and it's going to take all the good bacteria that's creating the mucosal lining and just break it down.
Oh, interesting.
And create that imbalance in your gut.
Okay. So if I were to share an example, so something that I'm obviously really big on protein, especially with my clients. A lot of times people have trouble getting natural protein in, whether that's through, like a chicken or turkey or like those lean meats. Some people can't eat, 100 grams of chicken in a day, and I totally understand that. And I'm all about finding those like alternative proteins. And so, I usually recommend things like Premier Protein for people, or just like a protein drink that's easy to grab. I was at the gym the other day and grabbed a like prepackaged protein. And I was scared because I have experimented with different protein powders over time, and I find that whey proteins like super affect my stomach. Like I'll get nauseous, or I will need to go to the bathroom like relatively soon. What is that way? Like, what's that really doing like to the inside when we're experiencing that?
So whey is a dairy product.
Okay.
So dairy products can actually be highly inflammatory
Oh,
to some people. So I used to eat dairy all the time, and then I couldn't because throughout time, all the things that I was doing to my body created an imbalance, and it was not able to process it properly.
oh, wow.
So usually when that happens, there's some type of imbalance going on. And the imbalance could be that you had to take antibiotics at one point and wipes you clean, and then it just takes forever to replenish them. It takes like 2 years or something crazy to replenish the good bacteria after taking antibiotics for like 7 to 10 days.
No way.
So that can create food intolerances.
Okay.
Because of the bacteria being all out of balance and not having the proper prebiotics to feed the good bacteria, and then you have an overgrowth of the bad. So those food intolerances can happen. And that's happened to me, like with the dairy, even eggs. Like that all started within the last 3 years when the gut issues that I had started to increase more and more because the inflammation was so high.
Wow. Okay. So you're saying like, because I'm sure we all have, like that was the go-to when we were growing up, like antibiotics were just thrown at us for pretty much everything. So that could be a reason why we used to be able to tolerate certain foods, but like now we can't, among other reasons why.
Yeah, because it's wiping out the good and the bad.
Wow. So
because we wanted to take out the bad, but it also takes out the good.
Right.
So a lot of times a good doctor will recommend taking a probiotic in addition to the antibiotic.
Okay.
Well, like we talked about before, there's good and bads of those too. But in any pinch, if you're in a pinch, just grab a probiotic to have something, and then also reference foods that will provide those probiotics. So then you're not in such a hole after you're done with the antibiotics in regards to your good bacteria.
Wow. That is very interesting. And you also, so you mentioned like this overgrowth. Like what does an overgrowth look like? Like what exactly is that?
So an overgrowth is too much of a bacteria, say like E. coli or streptococcus.
Okay.
Sometimes we all may have them, but when they come out of control for some reason, then you will start to see the effects of more inflammation, which inflammation can lead to bloating, diarrhea, constipation. It can lead to skin issues. When your skin all of a sudden has rashes or your acne is out of control, yes, we want to fix it topically for visual preference, but stepping back and looking at the root cause, something's going on in the gut.
So as a personal trainer, obviously I'm here to help people to exercise, be able to move better, longer. Now my question is, how does exercise influence gut health?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the more sedentary we are, the slower our gut's going to move because they work together. If we're just sitting around and eating the food and not going anywhere, it's just going to sit there. And yes, we are resting and digesting, but we have to have movement in order to produce proper enzymes to get things going in the gut. And that kind of links to hydration as well, because the more dehydrated you are, the less your GI tract is able to process the food and get rid of bad bacteria through, stool. So moving is absolutely necessary. I know for me personally, when I had my huge gut infection, it was called diverticulitis. It was super bad. I know afterward, if I walked, I was able to have a stool better than if I just sat for the day. And that's why if you go to the hospital and have any type of surgery, they're like, get up and walk so that way you can go and get out.
Right.
It just kind of, that homeostasis in the body, it helps it regulate and move properly.
Okay. Well, and I've heard too, and I don't know, I hear from a bunch of different sources, like once you eat a meal to within 20 minutes, get up and take a walk. Like, is there some kind of sense to that too?
Yeah, exactly. It just helps the body move through, picks up that metabolism so that way you can process it and absorb everything properly, and then it can move through in a timely manner.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Because really, when people say they poop every 2 days, that's not normal. I don't care if it's normal for you. That's legit not
Dang
normal.
it, Krysti, just going to call me out right here.
You shouldn't hold that in. You shouldn't hold that in for more than a few hours.
Noted. Great to know. Wow. Learning so much about myself on this podcast right
now. TMI.
So, okay, let's go back because you also mentioned hydration. So what role does hydration play in the gut health too?
It's a similar thing. It helps move things through.
Okay.
If you are dehydrated, it's just going to sit in there. And then if there's a lot of bad bacteria, it's just going to fester. And then you're going to get hard stool, and that's going to weaken the gut lining, leading to more problems. So if you do increase your fiber, which is a good thing, definitely continue increasing your hydration as well, because that's going to help pull it through, pull out any toxins that don't need to be in there, and then get rid of it.
I love that. So it's kind of like a pairing. Like you have to have both. You have to have the fiber and you have to have the hydration.
Yeah. And you'll notice if you increase fiber and don't increase your water, you let me know how you feel.
Be backed up for days.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So like let's say like people want to find out more about like how to like have their gut microbiome tested. Like what are the current technologies, methodologies that are used for like analyzing someone's individual gut microbiome?
Yeah, so in the conventional medicine, there's not really anything to my knowledge. So usually you have to go outside of that to functional medicine. And there's different types of GI map tests that we can do. And what that is it's an at-home test. Usually you go to the bathroom in a little cup and you mix things up and you send it off. And what that's going to show us is the amount of bad bacteria that have it, there's tons of them. Depending on which test, you may have more on one than the other. Some of them can show if you have candida, which is a yeast in your gut. Most of us have it, but again, if it becomes overgrown, that can be an issue. And then also what good bacteria you have, because not always is it that you have an overgrowth causing the issue. Sometimes it's that you have an undergrowth of the beneficial bacteria. Because if you remember, the good bacteria helps create the mucosal lining of the gut lining. So if those are low, that in and of itself could just be causing the weakening and opening those junctions to let the toxins out. So sometimes the good bacteria needs to be boosted up. And there's different ways to do that. Giving probiotics, eating the foods, getting the movement, managing stress, stuff like that can help that. So that's really like one of the simplest ways to see what your gut microbiome is doing. And there are some ways on just certain lab tests, like blood work, that you can look and be like, I think something's going on here. There might be this H. pylori bacteria overgrowth or things of that nature. But really looking at the stool, sending the stool in, because I don't look at it. I look at that report. Looking at that is really going to give you some more answers and a better direction to solving what's going on in your gut.
Okay.
Or elsewhere, because some people don't even feel it in their gut.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting to hear. My husband's company is doing something through their health insurance where I got a little box that I got to put some stuff in, close it up, and I get to send it off and learn more about my own gut. So I'm excited to see kind of how that comes back and what that looks like. And then, we can continue this conversation and get even more in there and see what's going on. But I think that's fantastic. And I really think like as a functional health nurse, like you're really providing like all of the like aspects of wellness that can help someone really figure out like, okay, if you do have this issue, like let's make sure that you're supported in all these other areas so that you can really be taken care of and do what's best for you and live your life to the fullest and the healthiest that you can be. And I think that that's amazing. The work that you're doing is incredible. And and probably so rewarding too for you.
It definitely is. I get giddy when I get labs and stuff back and I get to like help people have that light bulb of like, oh, it all makes sense. It's all connecting to each other. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
And then it kind of gives them a sense of relief, like, we can fix this. Mm-hmm. Wow. It's not just, oh, it's high, we're going to check it in 3 months.
Yeah.
And like, what am I supposed to do with that?
Right.
So
yeah. And you kind of get to walk through that with them and kind of take their hand and show them that there's ways to get through it and that they don't have to go through it alone, which I think a lot of people are afraid of, especially when it comes to medical things. So I think that's amazing.
Oh yeah. It's definitely scary if you don't know what you're doing.
Very cool. Yeah. Very.
And I even, when I had my own issue, I knew what I was doing and it was still scary because there was so many gaps in education throughout my surgery, because I ended up having surgery.
Okay.
Throughout that surgical process, there was so many gaps and it's just astonishing. So that kind of fueled my fire to like fix that. You know what I'm saying?
I can imagine. Yeah. And now you get to help prevent other people from being scared and going through that. And I just think that that's so cool. Well, Krysti, the end part of my show here is Absolution, where we talk about something that we want to within the fitness industry, within the fitness culture, wellness culture, that we think should be absolved of, that we can free ourselves from any guilt and punishment. So I'm curious to know, what are we absolving today?
I hate the scale.
Amen, sister.
I
Oh,
think,
gosh.
there's so many issues. First of all, if you do it first thing when you get up, that's wrong, because you gotta poop first if you're gonna do it. Second of all, it's known that if you get on the scale, whether you consciously know it or not, your cortisol level is gonna go up, and that can actually create more issues down the way of like hormones and all this stuff. Then you're not going to lose the weight. So if you are going to do the scale, like once a month, pay more attention to like how our clothes are fitting, how we feel, that kind of thing. And yes, we all want to have, guns like Abby. If you want guns like Abby, do the programs. But in the meantime, while you're in that process, give yourself grace, stay off the scale, and just love that you're in that process and that you're making the change.
Krysti, I love that so much. I think that is such a big thing within fitness culture, is people that get so obsessed with the number on the scale. I like to call them scale and non-scale victories. Like, you can look at the scale, sure, but like when that number goes up and down, that means nothing to me. I want to know, like you said, how your clothes are fitting, how your energy is, are you sleeping better, your percent body fat. Like, those things are more important to me than the number on the scale. It's when we're recording this, it's Olympic time frame. So we're looking at like Alana Mayer, who is on the rugby team for the USA, and she's been talking about the number on the scale and her own body. And we know that she's beautiful and she's a beast. And someone made a comment about her weight, but like, she's like, I don't care what my weight is. I know that I'm healthy, and I know that I'm here to do my job in my sport, and that this is exactly how my body is supposed to be. So yes, I think that is amazing. We're absolving, we're wiping our hands of that today. No reason to hop on the scale every single day, unless you want to stress yourself out. Nobody wants to be more stressed out. We don't need that.
No, we don't.
So, Krysti, if people want to hear more from you, know more about you, get in touch with you, how can they find you?
Everything can be found through Instagram. It's Krysti, Krysti, Jonas, Jonas. And on there in my bio, I have a link tree that has the option to schedule a discovery call with me, which is about 30 to 45-minute call where we just kind of get to know each other. I hear your story, what you got going on, see if it makes sense to work together. And then I also have other things that I love of that nature, so they're there as well. But Instagram is where it's at. I also have an offer for any of Abby's listeners, 15% off any of my concierge packages, which I have multiple. That will be good through November 30th of 2024.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Krysti. This was so educational. I learned so much, and honestly, like, can't wait to dig into it a little bit more, like listen back and like reevaluate some of my own things too. And I also look forward to seeing more of what you do. I love following you on Instagram and just seeing all of your posts and encouragement and just everything that you have to offer. So thank you for being you, and thank you for joining me today.